Hello everyone, welcome back to BrightTALK's live panels from CyberTech TLV 2019. I'm Guy Dagan, the moderator. I'm the co-founder of Consientav, a cybersecurity awareness company. And with me are our esteemed panelists. We have here Ilany, the CEO of Portshift. We have Hofesh from NeuraLegion, and Ory Segal, the CTO of PureSec.
Hello.
So before we start the panel, let's get acquainted. So, Ran, let's start with you.
Absolutely. Very glad to have this talk, Guy, this morning, this afternoon. My name is Ilany. I'm the CEO and founder of Portshift. A little bit about my background, at least in the last 15 years or so, I was mainly developing network security solutions for enterprises, high enterprises. And Portshift is essentially a platform that is doing identity-based workload security for the cloud, which essentially provides a solution for DevOps and DevSecOps for the industry.
Thanks. Ory?
My name is Ory Segal. I'm the CTO and co-founder of PureSec. I guess the leading company for serverless security. My background is in application security. I've been doing that for the past 20 years. Prior to founding PureSec, I was 5.5 years as Senior Director of Threat Research at Akamai, here in Israel as well, leading a team of researchers. And prior to that, I was at IBM for 5 years, leading the IBM AppScan product line. And I got to IBM through a series of acquisitions starting at the end of the 90s of a small Israeli startup cybersecurity company called Sanctum that invented the web application firewall and the space, basically.
Wow.
So my name is Hofesh. I'm the CTO of NeuraLegion, also co-founder. We mainly, our company is application security testing. We combine machine learning with new ways to find 0 days and unknown vulnerabilities, basically AI-led fuzzing. We're a new startup, and I think just today or yesterday, we won the Best Startup Award in CyberTech.
Yes, congratulations for that.
Thank you. Thanks.
So just a second before we start the discussion, I'd like to remind the audience that they can send us, you can just send us questions during this live panel, and we'll try to integrate the questions and answer them. So, guys, the first topic is security challenges and vulnerabilities in DevOps, because this is what we're talking about in the panel. So, Ron, let's start with you.
Thank you, no problem. So absolutely, I think when talking about security challenges and vulnerability for DevOps specifically, I think we can actually divide the discussion into two phases or two layers, okay? One of the layers will be organizational frictions between, let's say, DevOps and security per se. Mm-hmm. And another aspect will be actually what are the technology barriers between security and DevOps to begin with. And I believe that when talking about the organizational challenges nowadays, specifically when talking about the cloud infrastructure and DevOps infrastructure, we have seen, I would say, a lot of frictions, specifically when sort of seeing what happened in the last 15 years or so in terms of the IT operation perspective. We have seen like VMs in the cloud starting like a decade ago. We've seen like SaaS infrastructure, IaaS infrastructure, PaaS infrastructure, a container, serverless. Again, everything is sort of pushed up to the stack. So developer will do the minimum in order to move things into production environment. And as a byproduct, we see the DevOps, NoOps. Obviously, those are the orchestration tools that help move things much faster. But what we say is essentially that sort of security or maybe more precisely application security stay behind. Okay, it stayed behind from maybe the process perspective. It's always an event that comes during the development lifecycle, during the CI/CD pipeline. It can come on the end of the development lifecycle. It's eventually something which is manual. Okay, you see always like a security folks that needs to open a port, okay, or an IP on a specific firewall or security in the cloud in order to permit communication between two different applications. So essentially, I believe that I would start with the high-level perspective challenge, which is the friction between those two organizations. which I will let my esteemed colleague maybe elaborate about this.
Yeah, friction is a good description, but thinking about the fact that now development organizations and operations are working together to push software more rapidly, for example, to the cloud, you get a situation where IT security or traditional security groups and architects are left outside this circle, and as my esteemed colleague just mentioned, are not in the loop. They're incapable of influencing the process, and a lot of the times they get involved a lot more, a lot late in the process, which is too bad, obviously, for security.
It's a very interesting point, I think, overall. Because there's like a known animosity between the two groups, the developers and the security teams. The developer basically just want to create more and more code, want to deploy faster, want to just put the product out there. And in the old days of security, it was like a barrier, basically.
Correct.
You wanted to push your product, your new idea, you wanted to continue the business, and which is basically what we are all doing, just want to, do business. And the security will stop you, no, you can't, wait, we need to do penetration testing, we need to do security analysis, we need to go over review, code review.
SSDLC, everything when it comes to secured architecture and stuff like that, yeah?
Exactly, and it would block the process. And the new idea of security in DevOps is just combine the two aspects into something that flows more naturally.
They need to be an enabler rather than a gate,
Correct.
as they used to be historically.
Yeah.
So are there any specific but specific vulnerabilities or specific extra security measures needed to be taken when we're speaking about DevOps?
Yeah, absolutely. We can expand on the security perspective, but to extend the point that you have just mentioned formally, I think that what we see specifically when talking about agility, we see that folks are moving to the cloud. It's already there, and the fact that you have running operation, it's a fact to begin with. So then, what we see usually when we talk with the organization and with customers, that they're in some sort of impossible trade-off. Okay, it's either that you are very, very fast, very, very agile, but not very, very secure, because again you want to drive the business, you want to drive the CI/CD, the application there to be running out there, or you are very, very risk averse, very, very concerned from the security, and then you need really to do the plumbing. Okay, again, to really
you never want to do the plumbing.
And again, this obviously impact the speed of your organization to move things out there into the production. So I think this exactly trade-off that we are talking in the friction, this is exactly the place that I think the right, I would say, combination of work between DevOps, DevSecOps, and security will actually create, I would say, security and operational together without any trade-off in any type of the aspect of the operation. Obviously.
I would say that if you're looking for problems that are now new or introduced in this world, and so going back to the point that you have now a group of operations and development working together, pushing software rapidly all the time, continuously, and because security operations or IT security is not a part of this, then you're losing control. You're losing the ability to govern what's being shipped out and how secure it is. So rather than gaining from having a DevOps team that allows you to govern and control what is being pushed, you're losing that control in the security aspect. So
that's the friction we were speaking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
And since you asked a question about vulnerability and sort of attack vectors, or from the attacker perspective, we wouldn't leave this question alone, so to speak. Okay. So essentially, in the old days, before the cloud infrastructure, before DevOps, SecOps, we had only the internet, okay, and the LAN, okay, the on-prem. So we had a firewall, a gateway, in order to control what is going from the internet to the obviously to the on-prem. We had a single perimeter. It was very simple, okay? Once you move to the cloud, or more specifically and accurately, you move automatically to the cloud, you have different types of perimeters. The infrastructure is not yours. The question is always how you protect your infrastructure. And probably more accurately, how do you protect your computing resource? How do you protect your workload, your application, containers, serverless, from running in your environment? Or how you protect unauthorized workload containers or process to run in your environment? This is one of the key questions. And another perimeter, which is also very important while moving to the cloud, is protecting your data. How do you protect the data? Specifically when talking about platform as a service. I mean, Redis Lab, RDS, again, databases and external services. This data is not our infrastructure, is owned by obviously the cloud vendor. You need some sort of a mechanism to control who is accessing this type of data, whether it's yours, okay, whether it's ours, whether we can prove it's ours, our resource to begin with. So I believe those two new perimeters, I mean the computing perimeters, the data perimeters, really impose a challenge, okay, to do both, as we mentioned formally, to make security much more faster, but again, much more secure. You need a different type of security in the cloud, which is not IP port and protocol get in and get to this point. We need a different mechanism in order to really secure those perimeters.
It's a good point about the perimeters. Specifically, if DevOps can spin up and down new resources and new perimeters that you don't protect, then yeah, that's a serious problem.
Yeah.
Also, the old perimeter is dead. You know, lots of people are not going to like me saying that, but there is not really a point in having a firewall if your whole infrastructure is in AWS or a Google Cloud Platform or whatever cloud provider. And it's a new brave world of trying to understand where my infrastructure starts and where it ends. Is my app secure? Where do I put the firewall? Do I need a firewall? Do I need to configure a specific firewall for each container?
Is it supplied by the cloud
vendor
provider, but by the vendor itself?
Generally, but if you think about it, let's say we're using some kind of a service for containers, like Kubernetes and things like that. You have a shared environment. There are other companies, other people who you're not aware of who they are and what their intention is, sharing the same resources with you. And we know about attacks like Rawhammer and physical attacks that can jump between hosts and can compromise your data. And it's a new type of thinking on how to handle those issues. You don't know who you sit with, who's there with you, and it's scary.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. And I think if the problem was complex, like a decade ago, just having your internal, external, north, south, east, west, DMZs, then in the cloud it's even much more in scale, because now you have distributed security groups and accesses. You don't have a single gateway. So imagine that you have, instead of like managing 2,000 rules, network rules, managing like 20,000 rules distributed among your workloads. It's not, it doesn't make sense in the environment. So I think this is a big gap. And I believe the second gap is the fact that even if you had some magical way, okay, to control your network infrastructure, then the question would be actually, how do you really correlate between the applications and the actual network infrastructure? Okay, because eventually you need to define the rules, okay? So how do you really know what to define if you don't really understand how the application are deployed and who is talking to who?
Wow, that's a very interesting question. Very good point. But since we have a few more issues that we'd like to discuss,
you can go on.
And we can that you can go on in this issue. Before I integrate some of the questions from the crowd, I'd like to ask maybe a basic question for those of us who are not that familiar with DevOps. So, what's the difference? What's the actual difference between DevOps and DevSecOps? Bao, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, I'll try. Like talking about any acronym and any new buzzword out there, people are not going to like my definition, but I think that if we had the classic development and the classic operations, IT, and we had this, if we think about what DevOps, before even DevSecOps, what DevOps really means is try to take the whole roundabout of going, I want to deploy my new program. I need to send an email to the IT to create a new machine. Then I need to wait for a system to install the operating system. And then I RDP into this system, and I see that there are 0 requirements installed. And I need to start this loop all over again. And DevOps came to practically solve this by integrating the IT with the development, operations. So development and operations together to create this kind of faster process. Now, DevSecOps, and it's again really interesting to think that the sec is not DevOps sec, it's DevSecOps, because the sec is the glue. It's like what brings together the operations and the development. At least that's the way I see it.
I think the issue here is, I think you basically say that, but tearing down the silos that you had between IT and operations and development to shorten the life cycle that it takes to rapidly and continuously deploy, and then security has to do the same. We talked about it in the previous question.
Security has to be part of
it has to be integrated if you want it
it
to be efficient and a part of the organic process of deploying very quickly. And you can't have silos again. So I think that's the reason for the invention of DevSecOps. Also, that security requires a different set of skills that you don't necessarily find in IT or developers. So you needed something new to introduce into this mix, I guess.
Yeah, so I think obviously I agree with what you're saying, guys, about the DevSecOps or whatever. I believe I even heard the term NoOps in some organization, but essentially, philosophically speaking, I believe that we all know the shift left trend. Shift left, everybody wants to shift everything left for the CLDC to make things much faster. I think what we're seeing with DevSecOps is actually an evolution of the industry. I mean, security wants to shift left as well. Okay, security wants to be part of the development lifecycle, part of the CI/CD. So I think the term DevSecOps actually represent the shift of the industry, okay, from 2 silos, okay, operation, DevOps, VMs, containers, serverless, and stuff like that, and security, so something which is more combined. And I believe you guys talked about it earlier. And I think we will see more and more security as part of the development lifecycle. I believe we are seeing an organization which either have a DevSecOps infrastructure or even SREs. Within the organic teams of the R&D, we see folks, okay, that has like owns the actual security, which is again, it's a part of the evolution of DevSecOps, obviously, and.
So it's also like liability.
Correct.
Like the developers, the operations, everybody needs to take part of the security operations. It's not just, we had the CISO office and the security guys, and all right, they take care of security. But now it's everybody needs to be part of security. Everybody needs to put their own skill in the game.
So this brings me to the next question, which ties exactly here. So. How do you make this disjointed security and DevOps teams work efficiently together? What's the secret?
It's $1 million question.
It's a good question.
How do you make it work? I would start by being more inclusive. Again, tearing down the silos. This has to be the same teams. I haven't seen an organization that actually has different, completely separate teams that are completely disjointed that manage to do that properly. So it has to be a part of the culture, the development culture, the testing culture. It has to be really imprinted into the DNA of those teams.
What mixed teams like that, having different managers?
For us, I know that our developers also do a lot of the security testing hands-on themselves. You really see the difference. Yeah. Well, with everyone with security background in a security vendor. Yeah, but I think that's the first.
Yeah, actually, I agree. I think we need to do 2 things. I think in general, I think we need to make security tool to be much more DevOps. Okay, so stuff like security as a code. We'll probably talk about this in a minute or so. Will be part of the evolution. I think. We need to have security tools and security technology to be much more adapted to the development lifecycle from one hand. And from the pure organizational perspective, I think that we talked about the CISO office and the fact that it's changed. So I think the CISO or the security officer will come more like guidelines-oriented folks, guidelines how to do security right, and eventually the folks which will actually do the operational security will be DevOps, DevSecOps, which essentially will use those tools which are more adapted, okay, to the DevOps in order to preserve security. And I think the name of the game here is delegation. Okay, I think
and cooperation.
And cooperation. I think security folks and officers should actually learn how to delegate more of their responsibilities to the operational folks. I know it's hard.
That's a hard
It's
thought
almost
for
like,
us as security guys.
But I think this is part of those tools, okay? If we really can create smart tools, okay, that can create, I would say, an ecosystem, okay, that can delegate stuff from the security to the DevSecOps or the operational folks, I think we gain much more efficiency in how the
kind of DevOps security trustees, maybe.
Officers or whatever, yeah.
Officers,
and it could be very simple. Just to give you an example, it can be like defining guardrails. Okay, security can define a guardrail. Let's say that guardrails are like operational environment. We have a production environment, a PII environment, and let's say a testing environment. And DevSecOps can really orchestrate everything with those guardrails. So this is more like a high-level meta or macro rules that eventually, I mean, with the appropriate tools, obviously DevOps, SecOps can actually use those tools in order to orchestrate things there.
It's a good point about the tools and how usable and how they integrate into the ecosystem. I think looking at how developers and DevOps, what kind of tools they like working with, and those tools are the tools with the smallest footprint that are almost invisible. They're a part of their day-to-day, like normal, almost automated tasks. And most security tools don't comply with that. The user experience. Security tools try to create dashboards and
they ask questions.
Security vendors think you want to sit all day in front of their product, but in reality, if you want the tool to be helpful and to be an enabler for DevSecOps and things like that, it has to completely disappear and sort of intertwine with the rest of the processes and
integration, automation.
Yeah.
Just have your REST API, or have your like invisible point of entry to the process, and we don't want to see you anymore. That's it. Just create your reports, do your thing, and fail the build.
Now it's tricky because nobody will buy a security product that has no dashboard, right?
But no one wants to use it.
Exactly.
That's a very interesting point,
That's a conflict.
to be honest. Yeah, it's true.
I'd like to integrate now a question from the crowd.
Awesome.
Someone was asking us, how are customers using your solutions in the cloud and in fast environments?
That's me.
So,
how are they using it?
Yeah.
Well, as invisible as possible, I hope. I can answer specifically about
that's the question.
PureSec.
The question is about your products and how do they integrate.
So again, I don't want to do too much of a pitch, so I'll try to keep it, I guess, generic and relevant to what we just discussed. The first thing we did was to try to understand how the lifecycle of function as a service development works. How do developers write code? Where do they store the code? How do they deploy it to the cloud? How do they control the configuration? And how do they do monitoring and visibility in serverless? Today, people talk about observability. And we pinpointed the points in the lifecycle where we can integrate in the most seamless way possible. So for example, developers can run from inside the IDE or command line a scanning tool that is capable of statically analyzing the code and making sure that the configuration is as resilient before actually deploying, so not to waste time. It can be weaved into a part of the build process, so it can fail the build and generate artifacts for security, and also automatically mitigate already. So a developer gets, let's say, a Jira ticket, the build failed, there's an event, already with the resolution and the action that he or she needs to take. So it's really making the loop very, very small and very efficient. And then obviously runtime protection in the cloud and a lot of feedback to make sure that people are aware of what's going on with applications. And for us, in cloud, in serverless or cloud native environments, that visibility is crucial. Being able to govern and know what assets you have out there is almost half of the
That's kind of a basic problem in information
you're
security, bro. Finding the assets, the crown jewels, and protecting them, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if we talked about, shift left, okay, moving stuff to the DevOps, so really fast and serverless are really shift left. Again, we are talking about moving from the CD to the CI, obviously, because obviously the solution will need to be integrated to the compilation systems. It needs to be integrated within the code, obviously, so that you can really have control when the code is, it's running out there. So we need to implement your security as part of the embedded code within the system. So again, very high level of philosophically, when talking about serverless, it's a really, I would say, a very natural evolution of how shift left you are. And I think, from my perspective, it's an ultimate. I think it's the ultimate DevSecOps integration. And from one hand, but from the other hand, I think that there will always be like serverless, okay, server fast solution with fat client, containers, and VM. I mean, there will always be some type of combination between them because again, serverless are like stateless in terms of the logic itself. So you need to keep the logic somewhere. So I mean, the CD wouldn't like disappear. CD security solution wouldn't disappear. There will always be some sort of integration between CD and CI in terms of being able to deploy secure stuff, either containers, workloads, processes, or obviously fast and serverless.
I have another interesting question from the crowd. Could you talk in general about any customer experience in SAST on I-series platforms, RPG, or control or COBOL code?
Somebody's messing with you.
I'm
just kidding. Has to do something
Too
with
many acronyms.
Static analysis and
Like
acronyms.
too many buzzwords.
But static analysis in COBOL, that I heard.
Wow, static analysis in COBOL. That's an interesting topic.
NASA
I
still
know-
uses COBOL, so
To be
lot of
honest,
banks.
Most of
there's
them
like
legacy.
banks
30, 40
and
years ago.
financial organizations also, not only banks,
Yeah,
like
I know.
insurance companies.
Let's try to
etc.
decipher the question again, though it sounds interesting.
Yeah.
it's wow. Could you talk in general about any customer experience in SAST, SAST on I-series platforms, RPG, or COBOL code?
So I know that IBM, obviously this has to do with IBM. For my days at IBM, we actually had, and they still have, a static analysis product, I think AppScan Source, that can scan also COBOL code.
Yep.
About customer experience, I can't tell. It's too many years since I've left. I can't comment on that.
Okay, well, we'll move on for
Besides,
now.
we're selling only new stuff.
Okay.
There's now COBOL running serverless, by the way. So
Really?
AWS, yes. there's
Wow.
a runtime.
That's nice.
Cool.
So let's talk about a little bit about the zero trust architecture and facilitation ways for zero trust. I believe it's a very interesting topic, especially when we're talking about the cloud and everything moving over there. So, Ba, would you like to start?
Yeah, I can shoot something there. I
Take
think
a
that.
Take a shot.
Yeah, I'll try. So, zero trust is very relevant when we're talking about SDLC and about all the new world that which is cloud. As we said, I think in the beginning about having a shared environment, shared resources, shared space, zero trust become more and more relevant as you're not always aware who's there with you. I think it was 2008 or 9 where Google published this paper. Don't quote me on here.
The Beyond Core.
Yeah, exactly. About, I think that was the actual trust of zero trust, and it was a very interesting read. And it was where bring your own device just came in. Then It's very interesting thing. Like
Yeah.
I think it's a very hard problem to handle, and it's a very interesting subject.
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually our inspiration was from Google Beyond Corp philosophy. But just to tie this question to what we started the session, sort of, again, we are talking about different attack vectors, different perimeters in the cloud, and it all really boils to what is zero trust. And essentially, zero trust is not to permit anything unless it's explicitly permitted. This is zero trust. The embodiment of what I just described is I wouldn't let any code or any workload or any lambda, so to speak, to run in a specific environment unless explicitly it's defined, or I wouldn't let any type of communication to be out there without explicitly define the rule or the policy. Now, I think conceptually this is the holy grail of security. Yeah, this is like, if I don't really understand what's this, I'm not going to approve it. The challenge with the zero trust is essentially how to do it correctly and how to do it fast and agile way. Because
Exactly.
theoretically speaking, you can always connect one workload to one workload on IP based and port-to-port stuff and stuff like that. But again, it's not scalable. You cannot really do it.
It slows things down.
And yes, and usually you lose things in the configuration. You get the Swiss cheese effect as part of this type of mechanics. So you need a different type of technology to help you do the zero trust. Specifically when talking about on infrastructure that you don't own. So I think there is the opportunity for new companies to present a different technology, a different product that really supports zero trust in the cloud from an underlying infrastructure deployment, but also from a policy deployment. Okay, you'd like to be able to describe a policy which is again scalable, it's simple, you don't have a lot of rules, you can really do zero trust that is working in high scale. So those are the two layers that I can envision when we talk about zero trust.
In serverless, that's actually very interesting because today the way it works is you actually always trust the cloud provider. You get a.
Do you have a choice?
Yeah, you don't have a choice.
That's
True, but I'll give you an example. You write a serverless function, you bind it to a certain event trigger, and then you trust the cloud provider that the event trigger actually came from the cloud provider.
Yeah.
But in reality, anyone can trigger that event. As a matter of fact, I can use a command line, a CLI tool to invoke the same function and say that I am an S3 bucket, for that matter, and do whatever
in
I
the
want.
middle.
So the point of zero trust in serverless is still very young, and I think we are going to see, maybe new technologies in this space, and obviously the cloud providers providing some sort of verification that the events that are triggering even microservices and containers, but also serverless, are indeed cloud vendor originating from cloud vendors. So today you can't really verify that.
It's really amazing what you just said, because thinking about that, you can't actually, if you work at a cloud, whatever provider, you give them 100%, you have 100% assurance that everything that you run there is secured.
Correct.
I think that's also part of the compliance thing, that you have your ISOs already covered by the and all those things, and sometimes you take it too far and you think that even application layer issues and even as you just explained, all those things are not actually covered by the cloud provider. And in today's world where cloud is your new standard, it's very hard to understand where the limit or where the line comes, where you need to handle security and where it's their choice to handle security.
Yeah. When you'll get hacked, it will be your responsibility. Don't worry.
The responsibility will be yours eventually. So I have another question from the crowd. Can you tell us the top couple of ways companies make security a first-class citizen in the dev process? Static scans is certainly one. Any others?
So I think static scans are good, are nice. All image scanning are obviously very, very important. But I think the name of the game is how you protect your runtime. The runtime is what is running out there. It's running in production or testing environment. Our LAN is obviously, our development is on the cloud, so we need to protect it. And I think you need some sort of solution to be able to intertwine, okay, between the CI/CD to the runtime. You need a mechanism that will some sort give you a confidence level that what is going out from your CI/CD pipeline to the runtime is really secured in runtime, and you don't see any discrepancies between what was planned to be deployed to what is actually deployed and is running out there. So I think, if I'm looking like 5 years ahead, and again we see more and more serverless, containerless technology, I believe we will see much more runtime protection solution from security perspective. I believe it will start with like visibility, because again, one of the main challenges that we have nowadays in the cloud is being able to see, okay, the application, to see what is running out there. Yeah, it will start with visibility, and then I believe it will move very, very fast to prevention, to something which really can impact, okay, the traffic or execution or whatever, depending on the solution. But I think it should all start. The runtime protection should start from the DevSecOps, from the CI/CD pipeline as a concept.
I think that we're looking at it a bit wrong. Excuse me. And I'll be blunt. Nobody wants security, really. Security is not fun, it's not interesting.
There are disablers, not enablers, right?
Nobody builds a really cool application and says, what do we need in this application? Security. Security, this is the first feature I'm going to think about. So if you want security to be a first-class citizen, you have to somehow make people understand that they have something to lose, because either money, reputation, their jobs. There's no other way to make security. Like people naturally don't want security. It's not a part of their, it's not a part of anything we do. And so you have to somehow enforce that. So regulation, regulation compliance. People need to be liable for these things. I think that's the only way to, make security first-class citizen. It's not like usability where people love doing that and it's going to be more fun to use the product.
But saying that, it's like you say, no one wants security. Let's enforce it on them. Well, I think security as a general thing is something that people don't like, because it's always something that they're being forced on. Everybody tell them, you have to have security. It's a must, it's a regulation, you can't deploy without security. And it only takes us back to the point where before DevSecOps. I really think that trying to bring the future of security is giving the developers themselves the right tools and the right understanding to be their own security counselors. If it's products that do remedy suggestions, if it's products that everybody
Nobody's compensating them for that. Why would they want to do that?
Because then they won't be forced to. If they take their own liability about security, then they won't come, if they handle the security, then they have nothing to complain about, because they do it.
It has to be a requirement that coming from either the product manager or the CIO or the CSO. It has to be a requirement in order to be a first-class citizen. And why is it a requirement? It could be a regulation, compliance, or whatever, it doesn't matter. But it has to, if you want it to be a first-class citizen, it has to be a requirement, just like usability, nice UI, marketing, anything else. It has to be a requirement of any software design that you're building.
I think, by the way, I agree with my esteemed colleagues. but essentially, I think that we are not arguing. We are really talking about the time that it will happen. Because I think eventually the vision should be that obviously security should be able to master, developers should be able to master their own security infrastructure. And it should be not something that is imposed as part of or a necessity as a part of the business perspective. But I think it should start somewhere. And I think the very healthy part, or the very healthy point where it should start is essentially exactly in the DevOps CI/CD focal point, and then moving much more.
So guys, we're towards the end of this session.
Sure.
And I have one more question that I can squeeze in, but please try to be fast in your answers. So I'd like to speak about the policy as a code and the separation of duties. Ron, would you like to start with it when it comes to DevOps?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we touched a little bit about. I will be fast. Okay, well, we touched about those issues formally by saying that we cannot really have security tools by UI as a standard modus operandi. We need different tools in order to key in policies to your infrastructure. And I think security as a code means that you can really combine security rules as part of your CI/CD infrastructure, integrated with those systems and being deployed either to the runtime or to the production environment. And I think it will combine two parts. One part, it will be stuff that developers / DevOps can really do in terms of separation of duty, what they can do by their role in the organization. But there will always be security folks that will provide the guardrails.
So security used to be like black magic. You used to have experts that they knew what they were doing, the tools that they were doing. If you want security to be a repeatable, continuous process that you can do with DevOps or DevSecOps, you have to be able to automate it. It has to stop being black magic and be scripted. And so policy and security as code and everything as code in essence is exactly the way to do these processes, automated, repeatable, and with the same standard all the time, and not rely on people's expertise.
That in education.
I think they pretty much covered it. I have nothing more to add. Very good points.
Thanks.
Great.
So guys, I think we're towards the end of this session. I'd like to thank you all for joining us at CyberTech for BrightTALK's panels, and we'll see you in the next panel. Have a great day.